The supermarket doors had just opened when my two children walked a few steps ahead of me. The older one took out the shopping list, while the younger one glanced toward the snack aisle and immediately turned back to ask if they could get a bag of something today. I gave a quick answer and picked up a basket. But before we had gone very far, my hand was already reaching into my pocket for my phone. The message I had received before picking up the children was still there. I opened it as soon as we stopped by the dairy section. It said that a sales director from the company whose stock I was holding was connected to an investigation. Below the message was a cropped image of part of a document. The person's name and workplace were not fully visible. I enlarged the image, read each line again, then scrolled up to see whether the sender had added anything else. There was nothing beyond a few short comments and an opinion that the news could affect the stock in the next trading session. A younger child held up a carton of milk and asked if we could get it. I glanced over, nodded, and took it to put in the basket. But almost immediately, my attention returned to the screen. One possibility after another began to appear in my thought. How serious was this? Was anyone else involved? Did the company already know? How would the market react when trading opened? I switched to the discussion group. The information had already started circulating there. A series of comments appeared underneath it. Some people thought an issue involving one individual said nothing about the company itself. Others worried that there might be more problems behind it that had not yet been disclosed. A few people were only concerned with how the stock price might react in the next session. My two children had already moved on to the food section. The older one searched for items on the list, while the younger one stood nearby, ticking up and putting down things that were not on it. I followed them, my eyes still returning from time to time to the comments appearing on the screen. "Dad, is this the right one?" I said yes and kept reading. My older child remained there and had to ask again whether the item they were holding was the one their mother had asked us to buy. Only when I looked up did I realize that I had answered without even looking at it. After checking, I said it was the wrong one and pointed to another product beside it. My child exchanged it, put the correct one into the basket, and kept walking. A new message appeared in the... Someone who had checked the information again said that what was circulating might not be accurate. According to what he had found, the person under investigation was not a director of the company whose stock I was holding. The image being shared had been cropped, so people might have misunderstood it. I immediately went back to the original image. The name was not entirely clear, and the section above it was incomplete. If the correction was right, none of the possibilities that had just appeared in my thoughts were actually happening. But the correction had also come from only one person in the group. He said he had read it somewhere else, but he had not provided the original. I searched online for the director's name. Some results mentioned people with the same name but different positions. Others simply repeated the information that was already circulating. The details varied slightly from one source to another, but most of them did not lead back to the original document. If the first report was true, I needed to know how serious the situation was. But if the correction was the reliable version, I also wanted a source clear enough that I would no longer have to keep guessing. All I needed was the original document, the name of the person under investigation, and the organization they worked for would resolve almost all of the confusion. I changed the search terms and added the name of the agency mentioned in one of the posts. This time, results were different. One page led to something that seemed closer to the original source, but when I opened it, it only quoted part of the information. I continued searching using the document name mentioned in the article. A younger child gently tugged at my sleeve and asked if they could take something from the shelf. I checked the prices and told them to choose one of the two things they were holding. They stood there considering them for quite a while before finally keeping the smaller package and handing it to me. I put it into the basket, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and continued walking with them. A few aisles later, I found myself thinking again about the name that had been cropped out of the image. If I could just see the complete document, everything would be clear. I searched directly for the document number I had seen in one of the posts. This time, another result. The page loaded more slowly than usual. While I waited, my older child read out the remaining items on the list. I listened while picking up a few things from the nearby shelves. Finally, the content appeared on the screen. I scrolled down to the section about the person under investigation, read the name, then looked at the workplace listed directly below it. It was not the person I had been thinking of. The company was different. I read the passage again, then opened the image that had been shared in the group and compared the two. The missing section was exactly what could have caused people to misunderstand. With the full document in front of me, there was almost nothing left to confuse. The tension that had followed me since reading the message began to ease. I sent the original source to the person who had messaged me earlier, then posted the confirmation in the group so that everyone discussing it could check for themselves. One person replied that he had just found the same document. Someone else said that the original information had clearly been misunderstood. I put my phone away, joined my children in the vegetable section, and continued with the remaining items. The younger one still wanted more sacks. The older one reminded them that we already had some at home, so there was no need to buy more. They argued for a few moments while I stood beside them choosing vegetable. I told them to stick to the list. The crop image still stayed on my mind. I did not know who had posted it first, whether that person had accidentally left out the top section, or whether they had simply reposted it from somewhere else. How many groups had the information passed through before reaching me? And were there still people who had not seen the correction? As soon as my hands were free, I searched for the image using a different phrase. Several more posts appeared. One had already corrected the information. Another still contained the original claim, and people underneath were still asking whether something was wrong with the company. A younger child called to me from the next aisle. This time, I locked the screen before walking over. The two of them were standing in front of several different drinks, asking which one they should get. I chose a bottle, put it into the basket, then looked at the shopping list again. Only 2 items remained. The phone stayed in my pocket as we walked through the next aisle. I already knew the original information was wrong, but I still wanted to see whether any other source said something different. Each new confirmation reduced the uneasiness a little. Then another detail would appear that I wanted to check. There were no unusual announcements on the company's information page. The latest news was still the same material I had read before. There were no changes in the most recent report, and nothing in the company's operations appeared to be connected to the story that had been circulating. When I returned to the discussion group, the person who had posted the original information had written that he had misread the company name and deleted his earlier post. The comments below had already begun moving on to other topics. My older child reminded me that final item was in the aisle on the other side. I followed them, picked up the last thing we needed, and went to the checkout. The cashier scanned each item from the basket. I took them back and packed them into bags while the children stood beside me and helped carry the lighter ones. My phone had not vibrated, but before leaving the checkout, I still took it out and looked at it. There were no new notifications about what had happened. The last message about it in the group was already some distance up the conversation. Below it, everyone was talking about another stock. I locked the screen and put the phone back into my pocket. When we reached the parking lot, I opened the trunk and loaded the bags inside. A younger child continued a story from school that had been interrupted earlier. This time, I listened from beginning to end. The older one jumped in to correct one detail, and the two of them started arguing about it. I closed the trunk, told them to get into the car, and we left the supermarket. On the way home, the document I had found still returned to my thoughts from time to time. Maybe because I had spent so much time checking it, I still wanted to make sure I had not missed anything. When we got home, I carried the bags inside, put the things that needed to stay cold into the refrigerator, and returned everything else to its place. The children had already moved on to something else. Their voices drifted in occasionally from the next room. My phone remained on the table the entire time I was putting everything away. When I passed the table again, I picked up the phone and reopened the original document. The name of the person under investigation was still there. The workplace listed beneath it had not changed either. I read the relevant section again, then went to the company's page. There was no announcement about the investigation. There had been no personnel changes, and nothing unusual had been posted that day. I closed the document, but instead of turning off the screen, I typed the company's name into the search bar one more time. The familiar results appear: company disclosures, financial reports, several analyses, and other material I had already read. I scrolled down, opened a new result, and checked the publication date. The article said nothing about the investigation. Most of it analyzed the company's business performance over the past several months. Some of the data was not new, so I skimmed through it until a figure near the end of the article made my hands stop. The forecast for next quarter's profit was significantly higher than the same period a year earlier. I scrolled back up to make sure I had not misread it. The author suggested that part of the growth could come from improved output, while the rest might come from selling prices and the contribution of a new contract. If those assumptions were correct, the next quarter's results would be quite different from what I had previously expected. I read the analysis again, more slowly this time, then looked at the sources. Some of the figures were linked to published reports. Others were identified as estimates. The assumption about the new contract, however, was mentioned only briefly, with little detail. I opened another page. The contract name appeared in an older article, but it only mentioned when the agreement had been signed. It did not clearly state in which quarter the revenue might be recognized. I found the company's latest report, scrolled down to the notes, and looked over the documents now open on the screen. Then I returned to the original article. The profit forecast was still there in the middle of the screen. I saved the article. One by one, I closed the pages I had opened while checking the information about the director, leaving only the analysis I had just read and the company's report. On one side was a forecast showing a sharp increase in profit. On the other was a report with many pages still left to read. I looked between the two tabs, saved my place, and locked the screen. I placed the phone back on the table.